Everyone, thank you for being here. It's an honor to welcome you today to today's session of the Transhumanist Africa Artificial Intelligence Short Film Festival. Our guest today is more than a filmmaker. He is a cinematic philosopher, a rebel, visionary, and one of the most daring and original voices to emerge from the African continent. His films are wild, bold, political, experimental, and always unforgettable. From Quartier Mozart to The Bloody Ones to Le President and Naked Realities, these aren't just movies, they're conversations, that they're challenges, they're visions of what Africa could be. He is a pioneer of Afrofuturism, a theorist of healing cinema, and a fearless critic of power, using storytelling as a tool for liberation. He's taught at Harvard, had his work shown at the Museum of Modern Art, and still shows up for the young creators who are ready to flip the script. Please join me in welcoming a master of thought and image, a visionary of African futures, Jean-Pierre Bekolo.
Hello.
What's up, Jean-Pierre? Good to set. Thanks for joining us, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for also challenging me because what you are trying to do is something of that is for sure exciting, but that is also part of the vision we all are excited about artificial intelligence filmmaking.
Fantastic.
How
Hey, you gonna roll the first one?
the whole idea of beating the machine somehow, or making sure that we stay on the top of what we have to do, that the machine doesn't take over, but that still at the same time we use it for our own interest. So thank you for doing all this. I'm excited that you have launched this project and that a lot of young people are willing to kind of be part of what cinema will be in the future. Yep. So, good morning, good day again. I'm sure that this little video uh, kind of create or raise some questions to you, I hope. Uh, and I think it's good to take notes of what actually you feel like saying after watching this, because there's a lot of ideas there. There are a lot of things maybe you might not agree. That's your right with, but I think it's very important to kind of rethink cinema somehow and to question it and on our own terms. So at least I'm talking about me from the African perspective. Okay, so what I really would like to do today is that instead of being too much theoretical on things that have nothing to do with films that are already made, I want to use two of my films, Naked Reality, which is the second Afrofuturist film I made, and then Les Seignantes, which is the first, but that is a little bit different in many ways. So, to kind of understand, Naked Reality, uh, I made this film with the intention of clearly push certain ideas. And obviously, these ideas are kind of carried by the character. And one of the character, or the main character, her name is Juanita. So Juanita is a TV presenter. Huh? TV presenter, why TV presenter? Because TV presenter and mainly the weather presenter. She's presenting the weather. And the weather is like storms, talk about tornadoes, rains, which are natural forces. So I thought having a TV presenter presenting the weather was connecting, me with the idea of the character being a natural force, somebody who can actually not just tell the weather, but actually make the weather somehow. So, maybe part of the whole generating tornadoes and all that stuff. So that's why I put her a TV presenter. Another thing is that I gave her a mother. I gave her a mother that would always call her to pray. And praying, which we all know, when you are Christian or a Muslim, you know exactly what it's about. But I was trying to put it on the African perspective. So pray, it's also praise, somehow. Praise is also like sending energy somehow, celebrating, you know. Obviously in Africa, we believe that the dead are not dead. So somehow praying is sending energy to those who are gone, to the ancestors. So some think that actually praying saints in Christian church or Muslim praying them is giving somebody else the energy because we should be praying or praising our own ancestors. So the whole idea of energy in the story comes along that let's say African people, black people who pray, let's say John, Peter, I don't know which saint, which is not African, has taken the energy to send it to, uh, I would say, some people who are not themselves. So taking their own energy to give to Western or white people or something like this. Another thing that is very important here is that Juanita has a lover, right? And the lover is a poet, you know, and the lover uses her as a muse. But the muse is that you are like the inspiration, you know. And again, here appears a battle of energy, meaning he's riding on her body actually, which is also a kind of metaphor of love. So the idea here is that he needs inspiration, and Juanita gives him inspiration. So in that sense, he's taking her energy somehow to kind of be able to write. So just to give you a little bit, few elements of what kind of drove me to kind of create that character. And then instead of having a classic antagonist like the bad guy, I kind of created Juanita's double. Juanita has a double. Somebody who's doing everything like her, or trying to be her. But the reason why I create that character is because ourselves, we have an enemy, which is ourselves. Meaning, we are I believe that we all have a mission. It doesn't matter how small it is. You know, I don't believe that we come to Earth just to be able to consume, eat, drink, and do whatever. I think somehow there's a kind of a calling. You know, there's a little calling of something, but the problem is to kind of meet your calling, and the whole challenge is how do you break all the barriers of the obstacle? And that's why I thought everything that prevents us to kind of join our calling, is our enemy. He's the bad guy. Or she's the bad guy. So Vanita's double is that. And the whole idea is uh, unless you can be yourself now, because we are always something, we are our image today. We are our Facebook profile, our social media profile. We have all these nicknames. But at some point, the real challenge is to find a real you. So, in that sense, the idea of having a double as an enemy is everything that prevents us to be ourselves. So, in the story, Vanita actually end up meeting this character who's at the same time like the head of the ancestors. I don't want to say God, but it's like there's one who's actually pushing her to fulfill her mission. And obviously, she has to go through cleansing and to make sure she kind of kills or neutralizes the double that is always in the middle between her and her own mission. So that's kind of very quickly the setup of the story and how the characters come along. So maybe just let's watch just a little clip so that we kind of see also how all this was translated into images.
Do you know the real origins of a hurricane called Katrina that hit the United States of America 150 years ago?
Each storm has its own name, just like a child. A windstorm is never just a windstorm.
If I want us here in Africa to understand the natural forces that interact with America, it is because we do have a strong history together.
Okay. So yes, so the idea here was to kind of um, uh, to develop this whole idea of um, how do we become who we're supposed to be? How do we become what we're supposed to become? And how do we go through all the spiritual barriers and fights in order to go through? So Vanita actually has a disease. That disease is bad luck. I want to see because the story is happening 150 years, from now. I wanted to believe that bad luck would be like the flu, just have like or malaria when you're in Africa, something, with two pills or something you fix it. Because today, bad luck is seen as something going wrong in your connection to your ancestors. And that's how here, when you have bad luck, they say, "Oh, just go to the village and get washed or cleansed or something." You know. But if we kind of turn it into something scientific, which that's why I like the idea of science fiction, that brings science to all this African kind of mysticism or myth or whatever it is. I think somehow it's very important to explain the connection. If scientifically, where is the connection we have with the ancestors? So the connection we have in the ancestors is the DNA because it's kind of a code that is there that comes from many, many generations, and that's within us. And I want to believe that we can connect, or people can connect to the ancestors through the DNA because they carry who they are in themselves. So the idea now is if we make it scientific somehow, because that's very important too. When I take this African myth or whatever, I don't want it to leave it as African things we cannot explain. And that's what the whole challenge. The whole film actually is talking about uh, I would say an African religion, just to put it that way, but in the scientific with scientific elements. So bad luck comes from the fact that there's a disruption in the DNA, meaning in the relation we have with the ancestors. There's something going on, And to fix it, obviously, is good to reconnect. It's important to reconnect with the ancestors. And when I say that it's just going to be like a disease, like a flu, is because we will know exactly what to touch, what to change, because you can read the DNA, and you can see this disruption. So anyway, so the idea of bad luck, uh, uh, taking it out of something mystical and try to make it something very concrete, very tangible, and very scientific, and that's a whole concept. Maybe a lot of African things that are seen as irrational or mystical are maybe just unknown or undiscovered science, And I like that idea of playing with these elements, that we don't just we're not able to explain them just because we are ignorant. So that's why I was thinking it's important to play with those different elements. Obviously, you see here that the film is just a kind of excuse, to bring up all these elements. It's really the story. I like when people always talk about stories as being what is important in the film. Yes, but I really want that story to be manufactured in a way where it conveys some elements, that for me explain the world and explain life. you know. The last group of character after the ancestors here is the immortals. You and I like the immortals also. I took it from a kind of Cameroon uh, vet myth, if you can call it that way, where the whole purpose in life, in that mythology, is to be able to gain immortality. Actually, we are on earth to steal or to take immortality, but we are not alone. Some are already immortal, but they don't want us to kind of take that immortality. They don't want us to become like them, because that's where they are winning over us, because they don't die. And our mission and everything we do, on this earth should be about becoming immortal. But it's strange how we are being distracted from that mission. When you just look at the food we eat, somehow it's all killing us. Even the medicine kills us. But we kind of part of all this thing, junk food. We don't really understand the mission that we need to make sure we become immortal. Or is it like we've been infiltrated, and that's what the film is talking about? Have we been infiltrated by some immortals who are lying to us, who kind of take control of few elements, and who make us send us to death, in a very insidious way? So I think these are the different group of characters I've developed in this. I mentioned already the poet, and yes, the Madiba character, I call him Madiba. Obviously, you can see that it's in reference with Nelson Mandela. But is this God-like priest, the great ancestors, meaning the king of the ancestors, And he's actually, and when Vanita is supposed to go get her mission, she's going to this world that is in the middle of different worlds. And we call it here the Dimsi, which is a kind of Cameroon name. Dim meaning blind, Si meaning earth, meaning it's the earth you don't see. So, and that's where he's actually kind of, and before she meets him, she has to really be cleansed. And that's what happened in the film, to make sure from everything that prevented to get her mission. So, Madiba is giving her a mission. And in that sense, it's a kind of, yeah, the great wise man, the godlike figure who's kind of spiritually tell you what you're supposed to be doing. The last character who's not a human in the story is the city. Is the city. The city the story is happening. When you see the expansion of cities in Africa, uh, I think a city like Yaoundé, where I live, takes maybe 5 to 10 kilometers wide with like every year or so. So it means that at the end, all the cities will be touching each other. Okay. We are grooming actually cities. Cities are the kind of the farms these days farms. So this urban kind of dystopian, chaotic, and whatever you can imagine is actually what you are producing. Knowing that the connection with the ancestors tend to happen where there's nature, in rural areas, in villages. So this means that few years from now, we won't be able to find places to connect with the ancestors. So meaning that we'll have more and more bad luck. Bad luck will become like an epidemic, like COVID or something. Where we to even seek treatment or healing will be really challenging because we won't have the kind of space that allow us to connect with the ancestors. So I'll stop you for now, and I want to hear from you because I feel like I'm talking alone. Then I will kind of finish with the second thing. Or you think I should finish with it? Yeah. Okay. So now the other film, thanks, Marlon. So the other film is Les Seigneurs, which is a whole different thing. Because this one is kind of, I went a little bit far in my ideas, and that's very important. The first video you watch was actually to show you how you should go for what you feel like doing. Really. I always feel that you get all these books. I love the how-to books in America. There's how-to book for anything or for dummies or something. And I think for cinema, you have a lot of how-to books. You have gurus who teach you that fame, which is not bad. But I think somehow the story you're carving, you kind of trying to put together should really represent, at a very, very high level what you're trying to put out, instead of using tricks to kind of fool people or to kind of get them. So the film I made before this one, it's called Les Seigneurs. So I made a film showing how, on my perspective as Cameroonian, as African, the genre film doesn't work. So if we take science fiction, the film is like, how do you make a science fiction movie in a country that has no future? That's actually a question you see in the movie. The other impossible genre was, how do you make a detective movie in a country where you cannot investigate? Another one is, how do you make a horror movie where death is a celebration? So the film is trying to get all these things happening, but it doesn't work. So the film is actually a kind of impossible genre film, according to the context. So this film I made it in 2005, and I was projecting Cameroon in 2025. So we are in 2025. So we are actually at the end of my science fiction vision of this thing. So now this film is supposed to be present. It's not anymore future this year. And next year is going to be past. So the idea of now the future becoming present obviously lead us to look at which kind of society we live in, what had happened. Maybe we should watch the clip so that you can see what I'm talking about. So can we just watch
Les
yeah.
Vongos nous tombaient dessus comme un malheur. Ce pays avait désormais une chance de sortir des ténèbres. C'était lui, Mivungo.
Allô, gars. Tu peux venir.
C'était encore lui, ici.
Chouchou. Ah, ma. Où es-tu? Je peux pas venir maintenant. Je dois aider une amie là. Mais Mais de toute façon, qui sont ces femmes? Et qu'est-ce qu'elles me veulent?
Elles
Yeah.
veulent te voir.
Okay. So
Dis à tes femmes qu'elles...
I know there are exciting images. So, but okay. So the idea here was very important. Okay, to be able to represent that whole utopian, but I call it also a city or life or country. I also call it a cautionary tale, meaning when you do science fiction, you ask the what if question. So what if this was this, or what if this was happening? So here specifically, the idea was that um, uh, what if in the future this place would be, let's say, no, I don't say horrible, it would be like a place where everything is about corruption, where everything is about transactional trading, the trading with the body for the money, kind of prostitution, but with the politicians, also who are part of this kind of transactional corruption of the system. So I picked two girls, to be the lead characters. These two girls, I want them to be like twins, kind of. So the friends, obviously, they when they operate, they kind of operate like one character at the same time. I didn't want them to be too old so that they would be like professional prostitutes. I didn't want them to be too young, otherwise it would be like pedophilia. So my idea was to take them in the 20s, like early 20s, so that it kind of gives a lot of insurgency, where the characters don't know everything about what they're doing. They're trying things. They try to take a chance. For example, at some point, this guy dies and then they want to take the body to throw it away and they forget the body on the street. So, because in movies, everything is perfect, everything works very well. I thought like they should be like, people who fuck up sometimes, So I didn't want them to be professional, that's it. And I didn't want them to know clearly what they want to do. So I thought it was very important to kind of keep that whole, how do you say it, shaky kind of story, what's going on. So, and I gave them some godmothers, who know what's going on. And I took it from a Cameroonian myth called Muvungu. Muvungu is a ritual women perform in the south part of Cameroon when everything is going wrong. Women perform Muvungu when they take over the power, of everything, because now it's too much, but they don't come unless it's really too much. My idea was that also depicting the political situation, for example, of Cameroon, I was like, maybe it's time to perform the Muvungu, because these rituals are always seen as past, things we used to do in the past. Me, my idea was to put in the future, because and bring it as a conversation on how we should deal with futuristic Africa. So the Muvungu, it's time to perform the Muvungu. But the old women are too old to be able to be sexually attractive to the politician. So they kind of using in remote the two girls who don't know very well what to do to kind of get them to challenge and to make sure maybe they change the system. So that's kind of how I designed it. So now this one is more dystopian than the other frame. So I kind of draw a parallel. So maybe you can just show the parallel I draw with the two, so that you can compare and see what. Um, okay, I thought the other one first, but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So the two films obviously have different development that as far as character are concerned, you know, but obviously you can read it and take notes, and in detail, there's another one to kind of put it together. You know. So I think I spoke a lot too fast. So maybe it's time for interaction.
Like you've always kind of pushed the boundaries of traditional storytelling, and how do you balance the honoring the African culture while experimenting with futuristic
Yeah.
ideas like Afrofuturism and AI and all that?
I think first, that's when naked reality is very clear. In naked reality, this is a very, very African story in that sense, where I'm trying to depict African religion. African religion meaning the power of the cosmos, of nature, of the connection with the ancestors. But I did it low tech because obviously I didn't. It was not the idea of making high tech first, maybe for the means, but also I think it was good to play on low tech, because Africa is also a place of low tech. People can fix anything, they can work with all this little technology. So I thought that it was good to touch, the low tech. And also, instead of, I think it's very important to take time to explain, African culture. And science is a way to explain it. When I say DNA, obviously nobody cares about DNA, when you start talking about African mysticism or spirituality. And I don't like when you get into spirituality because that's what kind of make us shy away from explanation. For example, right now I'm working on something they call the Mani Wata, meaning I don't know, sirens, whatever it is in the water. So a lot of people think they say that it's I mean, at least in Cameroon, in Douala region, where on the coastal region, they say it's their ancestors. But me, I like to believe that they are uh, extraterrestrial. Because they live on the water, and then people talk about going there, marrying them, having sex with them, or so it's kind of, for me, I call them extraterrestrial, and I'm trying to get people to prove me where is the connection between the ancestors and you know. And I think somehow the ancestors, which one go on the water, which one don't go, or how. So I just think there's a lot of explanation to be done here. So my idea is that anything we don't understand, we tend to put it to the spiritual or whatever. And I think this effort, and now this is your question, this effort to permanently try to get explanations, for me, is a way to deal with this Afrofuturism somehow. And now, and I'm sure artificial intelligence will help us so much, in many of the things we have been having blocked, so that now we can get a little bit more and we can produce or translate better, our vision into a reality or something visible. With a friend in South Africa, we were thinking about how do we create a kind of database of what Africans see. When I say see, it's not because people see so many things. Either it's mystical, either it's spiritual, either it's so people can tell you about all these images, but we don't have them. So my idea was to collect all the visual experience, black people have all over the world, and start obviously with the help of AI trying to make make them come to reality. So I think somehow these are the kind of projects I'm very excited. You know.
No, that's absolutely right. And this is, is right on time because the things are changing rapidly. Um, as you see it, how can is there an opportunity here now with the young African filmmakers to use technology to create maybe a different cinematic language and not just like copying Hollywood?
Okay, I was lucky. I always say that I was lucky that I studied semiotics. Semiotics, I always call it, it's kind of an African science, meaning, seeking meaning in anything. What does it mean that you, Marlin, are calling me? You called me to kind of come and do this work. We always look at what is behind in African culture. What does it mean that we're sitting here together with these young people trying to do this work? So why does it mean that I'm dressed like this today? So African culture always seek meaning in everything we do. And everything should have meaning. So we need to live a meaningful life. That's kind of what African culture teaches us. So if you you are aware of it, you don't need anybody else to teach you a language, because The language of cinema should come from meanings of different things, symbols you put in the story so that it goes somewhere. Now you just have to know how to manage the relation with the people who are have to read or decode the language that is unfolding, because you have to be producing the language at the same time you're talking. And that's what is good with cinema somehow. It's not like I'm speaking English or French. I need to learn the language before to come and just use it. No, in this case, we are producing the language for our audience as we are moving along with it. So that's for me very important. And I think this with AI is very, very possible. And I think I create a kind of alphabet, an alphabet to write things on based on symbols. First, because a lot of people are intimidated. They need to speak English properly, and a lot of people with great stories don't speak English. They don't know how to speak English, or French, So a lot of stories are not being told in terms of film, are not being translated into film just because of the language barrier, which is that a middleman we don't need. How do we go directly from the story we want to tell to the picture? So that was the attempt of this alphabet, which is still to develop. But the idea is that what we need is character. We need, structure with elements like this. We don't need all these put in place. So I think somehow, definitely, all these ideas that seem impossible even to me, even if I was doing them, now are becoming possible with the field of AI.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating to be able to, even as a technician in another vocation, to be able to now kind of visualize your thoughts and your ideas based on your research. And certainly that was the inspiration behind this festival, was to let a broader section of people sort of imagine what Africa could be like given this technology in the next 50 years. So we're really excited about what this is going to produce at the
Yes,
deadline.
yeah. Another thing is this, when you ask a young Cameroonian how he sees Yaoundé, for example, city in the future, most of the time he sees New York. So the whole question is this: how can you produce a world you cannot imagine? And cinema is a kind of medium where we can experiment, where we can start like producing something we want to become real. Because it's not about staying in cinema. Cinema should come out of cinema, at least in my definition. On the African perspective, I don't want this city, this world to be the way it is. But somehow, I want it to be different. And cinema is a platform where we kind of rehearse, where we kind of give images to those who don't see any image, and a lot don't see any image.
That's right.
Because
That's
also
right.
between the fact that the daily life is a prison, survival is a prison. You can't see, when you are in survival mode, which is tough for young people not to be able to see the future. So the whole idea is, how do we train, to produce images that we want to become? Because it's not just about images we're going to get Oscars. It's the image we want to live, we want to become. You know, and this requires a kind of effort, where you have to go beyond your daily reality. It doesn't matter how ugly or how messy it could be. But the very important thing, I think, is to be able to use cinema, to get us somewhere else, to get us where we wish we want to go.
Exactly. Well, that's a good segue into my next question is about, when you talk about healing cinema, can you explain what that means and why you think storytelling has the power to heal?
The mic is really like your mic. Man.
Can you hear me? Not good?
That's good. Okay. So yes, healing cinema. When you take phenomenon, kind of sees, if I take the African context, that the encounter between the African and the white man made us sick. Uh, that relation made black people sick. but it didn't just make black people sick. I think it made everybody sick, white people. So that relationship made us sick. So when you look at the world today, obviously everything you see how humans relate to each other with wars and all the sort of races, there's a lot of sickness, you know. But unfortunately, there's no hospital for it. There's no place where you can go with all this madness, you know, where humans are killing each other in millions, you know, sometimes, you know, World War II, one, you know. So there is no place really to go to fix it. The politician comes when there's no politician, military. So that's kind of how we deal with our sickness. But we don't deal with our sickness in a way of how we individually, with our mind, kind of work on it. So today, when you have a problem or a collective problem, you know, you have collective traumas. Somehow, you know, uh, maybe something happened, you know, then the whole community is traumatized. There's no place to go. Each one will will deal individually with his trauma, you know, going to see if he has one around a psychiatrist. But it was a collective trauma. It was not something that is between him and his parents, whatever. The whole Freudian uh, therapeutic psychiatric approach is about. You know, it's something. For example, if you take the whole repression of political movements, that is brutal. That kind of creates a lot of trauma, and that makes people feel sick. There's no place to go. You know, okay, you can go to see a psychiatrist alone, but it was not something to be done alone. No, there's a collective, a community that was victim of it, and there were perpetrators also. There was somebody's police or whatever. So, in that sense, cinema is the only place where you can sit together, you know, go through the story, you know, revisit the story, and to kind of get rid of what actually produced the trauma. There is a neuropsychiatrist I like a lot, Boris Cyrulnik. He is talking about how he was a war child and how Superman story helped him. You know, the Superman movie helped him. And he obviously, why do you think kids love superheroes? You know, because they are small, they are weak, yeah? They are small in the world of big people, and they are weak in the world of strong people. So, what actually the story does, what the film does, you know, is what they call is connecting through identification to what this guy Boris we call the rehabilitating hero. You know, somebody who's been through a trauma needs a rehabilitating hero. Somebody who's kind of compensate his weakness, his smallness, you know, to kind of make him feel that okay, he can overcome the trauma. You know, the trauma for him is like a cliff that comes like in front of you, and now how do you are you able to go beyond the cliff without falling to the cliff? So cinema has all the tools, all the elements between the hero, between the story, the narrative, and everything to help us heal in general. So there are many films that were made a little bit in that sense, but not really as in a very clearly articulate approach. And I was shocked by that because I thought that it was so obvious that it's good to stress the idea that cinema should actually be healing somehow and should be really produced in a way it should be healing trauma. Well, that's kind of what I can say.
What are the most effective ways to use characters in as metaphor? Can you see that question, John?
Uh, I'm not sure about the effective. You know,
Mhm.
I think first it's very important to know what you are trying to say, and I think some of the notes, you know, are kind of coming on that. You know, for me, I don't read the character until I know what I'm trying to convey as a message, what I'm trying to express. What do I want to depict about human being, mankind? What am I trying to do? And I always say that I will never recommend anybody to make a film if he doesn't have an opinion about the world. What do you think? What do you think
Mhm.
of what's going on? For me, that's where it all starts, you know. So once you know exactly what you think about life, what you think about the world, then we can start talking about developing a story and the characters.
Well, John, this has been very good. Um, I think we all got a lot of insight into your process, into how you shape your thinking about films, and really where you're coming from on the images and stories that you're producing. Um, as a kind of a wrap up, looking ahead next 10, 20 years, how do you imagine African cinema evolving, especially as these AI and other new technologies become part of this creative process?
That's a very interesting question. Between my wishes and what I really see coming for me, they're two different. Obviously, in terms of my wish, which is better, you know, I really wish that we are not going to do what we've been doing, mimicking the West. That's like been our drama, our we've been mimicking our lives. I like this Gabonese philosopher. He's talking a lot about how do you call it, the dazzlement. When your car is putting lights on your road like this and you don't see, you know, dazzling. I think dazzling. Yeah. And I think he's saying that's what the white man did to us. When he came, he kind of blind us, with these lights, and we haven't really been able to overcome it so far. And it's continuing. Hollywood is part of that dazzlement. So it's kind of a big distraction. And he wrote another book because he explained the whole colonial theory based on dazzlement. First, the white man was white. So we're like, oh, so what is this? And then he brought us things that were always like distracting our eyes, you know, making us, forget about what we've been doing, you know. And I tell you, in the book I wrote, cinema as a transformative tool for the therapeutic intellectual, he's actually, in the book, I'm saying something like colonialism, the encounter with the white man was an accident. And now we forget that we left people at home. We are going somewhere. Everything is involved now around the accident. We should learn. We should now learn how to pass the accident, continue the journey. You know? And in that sense, sometimes I think Africa should be thinking about the future without the encounter with the white man. Can we think about the future like if we never met the white man? For me, that's really one of the challenges in terms of where the future of this cinema should go. But obviously, we have to work towards that direction to make sure things don't stay where they are, and that's really how what I can contribute.
So much for sharing your vision, your wisdom, and your incredible energy with all of us today. Your work does remind us that storytelling is not just about entertainment, it's about empowerment, imagination, and transformation. We're honored to have learned from you, and we are excited to carry your insights forward into our own creative journeys. On behalf of Transhumanist Africa, Artificial Intelligence Short Film Festival, and everyone watching around the world, thank you again for inspiring us to dream bigger and tell bolder stories. Have a good day,
Thank
folks.
you.
Thanks a lot. Jean-Pierre, we appreciate you, man.
Okay, thank you, and good luck to everyone. Thank you.
I